Welcome to John Mike Keene, and these both revolve around Joe Rogan.
Can you talk about it?
Basically just full government control.
Bernie Sanders had no problem going on Joe Rogan years ago when Joe Rogan endorsed him. I've been on Rogan's show 3 times. I've probably heard over 100 hours of it in the past decade. A decade ago, Joe Rogan was a Bernie Sanders supporter who would get emotional talking about how important it is to legalize marijuana, who would get emotional talking about how important it is to get Christianity out of politics, in particular on the abortion issue.
I've listened to Joe Rogan for over 10 years and had real division on him. He really does have a traditional liberal view, just a very low view of Christianity. I can listen to him. I really like him. I think he's very entertaining. And I disagree with him on a number of issues.
Who had a host of left-wing opinions, including about healthcare, and liberals drove him away by calling him a racist, unearthing jokes he made, calling him a misogynist, really with no evidence.
When you make racist
calling him
jokes
a transphobe,
about people of color.
That just shows the left stuck on stupid.
I think they got us with TikTok. I really do. I think they're just really clever. They've been around for 4,000 years. I mean, America's but we're real young. We've only been around 250 years. Who knows if we're going to make it?
People like Joe Rogan were terrified of what the left have done, calling people names, throwing them in jail, prosecuting them, persecuting them, firing them. That's what a lot of Joe Rogan, he invites people on his show. He doesn't tell them what to think or say. He's trying to get accurate information out of them.
A
People
lot of
calling you
comedians
racist is likely
make
going to
jokes
happen.
all the time. Calling him transphobic because he didn't like
He
seeing
also didn't
Fallon
love the
Fox
vaccine thing, right?
beating up.
To our point earlier.
That also used to be a left-wing opinion, to be against vaccines like 20 years ago. Against
Joe Rogan represents the average cross-section of America. His audience does anyways.
He actually hasn't shapeshifted very much, to your point. The Democratic Party has shapeshifted and driven him away and alienated his followers.
It was the left that stepped up and changed the way they acted. Since the BLM riots in 2020, they have become more hysterical, judgmental, mentally brainwashing, angry, calling, black men misogynists was the norm for them, calling working class Americans backwards, deplorable, garbage. People, I think, smelled what they really felt, and they actually got scared into voting for Trump. Working class people, families felt judged and despised by the Democrats.
I think what he ended up seeing was an American political sphere that shifted, and he found ways. He's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. He found ways to walk into where those people were. Yes, he was a proud, ultra leftist, and then he became a proud person on the right, largely because he saw shifting towards the right, and that's where his money and his audience could come from.
And I still wouldn't call Joe Rogan on the right. Not a proud member of the right and not right wing. He was always just sitting there in the center, kind of neutral. But the left has pulled the whole bar so far to the left that someone like Joe Rogan appears right wing. And this lady shows the kind of disdain that the Democrats still have for people who disagree with them. She's already called Joe Rogan a racist. And now she's saying that he's only following money.
China's been here for 4,000 years. They've invented everything. They invented paper, alcohol, gunpowder, rockets, noodles, kung fu, and TikTok.
She has no idea what makes, like I said, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big anything on Joe Rogan. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but one thing I would never say about him is that he likes to censor himself just to change a buck, and he'll believe anything just to manipulate an audience. That is 100% not true. Many of you want to own my work, and it's just in time for the shopping season. I have 2 stores. This one is for my comic book stores. This is over at Shopify, called the Doug TuNapel Library. And you can get my hardbound books printed in America. They come to you in a cool shipping box that I designed myself, all of it hand-packed and the highest quality material made in America. These are hardbound books. Created, written, and drawn by me. They're great for the coffee table. They're really bright, beautiful stories for the whole family. The other store is my Fourth Wall store that has my merchandise for Doug in Exile. There's t-shirts, mugs, mouse pads. You click the item, you pick the size, and you put it in your cart, and we ship it to you. There's a link in the description of every video below. Thank you for supporting my work.
He shifted because more of his listeners shifted, and that's where he drove it to. That's nothing more than consumerism at work.
Which of his beliefs changed in the past 10 years? It's really hard to point out which of his beliefs.
But can I zoom out from him?
No one will actually name what belief he's changed in 10 years, which would prove that he was some kind of a chameleon. They have no evidence because it's false. A really dumb take. Wrong answers only, please. Speaking of wrong answers, here's the head of ABC News taking a question.
I have a question about Joe Rogan, and you've sort of touched on elements of this in the US. He's obviously the world's most popular podcast host. He has 3 billion listeners. He's sort of managed to successfully capture that bro market in America. And his influence is such that in the wake of the US election, the Democrats have said that one of Kamala Harris's mistakes was that she didn't appear on his program.
I actually disagree with that it's a mistake for her to not go on his program. I think it does reveal her weakness that if she went on that program, it probably would have been worse for her because Joe Rogan just has normal conversations. And in a normal conversation, she would look much worse. So I don't know if it would help her. I think it goes to a bigger thing of the Democrats knew they had to hide her because she was terrible.
So I'm just wondering if you had any observations about what's behind the Joe Rogan effect, how you believe he's managed to so successfully capture this huge market. And then for us here in Australia, how would or should the ABC be going about capturing that kind of audience?
Look, I'm not sure that I'm the right person to respond to that question. I am not a consumer or enthusiast about Mr. Rogan and his work.
Shocking.
That's the head of ABC News, and they're mocking that he's mocking Joe Rogan, like showing disdain, like I'm not a consumer of his. That's Kim Williams, the boss of ABC News. He's the reason why ABC News is failing. He shows no curiosity even toward Joe Rogan's content.
I did know about the banks, and I certainly did know that cracking down on AI the same way they cracked down on social media.
I am not one of the 3 billion, and I'm unlikely to be 3 billion and one anytime soon. I think people like Mr. Rogan prey on people's vulnerabilities. They prey on fear. They prey on anxiety.
Clearly, this man should be fired. Kim Williams, he's in the business of mass media. It's his job to know what 3 billion people in Joe Rogan's audience think. And for him to cast it like that shows that he's never watched the show. He's not a fan, and yet he's judging it, dismissing it, and really judging an audience of 3 billion people. You should be fired.
They prey on all of the elements that contribute to uncertainty in society, and they entrepreneur fantasy outcomes and conspiracy outcomes as being a normal part of social narrative.
Who has done that more than ABC News? I would like to know how he can say that he doesn't try to make people fear climate change.
Dr. Mann, is it too late?
The bad news is dangerous climate change has arrived. The good news is we can prevent it from getting worse. And the latest science tells us that if we bring our carbon emissions down to 0, the planet stops warming up. If we do that, and other countries around the world do that, we can prevent the planet from warming beyond a catastrophic 3-degree Fahrenheit level.
And I'm talking about regardless of your opinion on climate change, the way they cast it is to instill fear and to get people to believe the worst things about it, to get people to move and do something about it. That's what his channel did. What about the profiles they've done on declaring Americans racist, misogynist, anti-trans?
Tell me, how has your security routine and detail changed since all this, hate and rhetoric and laws being passed? I know
you can go down all of the leftist issues, and anyone who disagrees with it, his news group have said that Trump was coming to take away women's healthcare rights from women.
ABC radio program that was titled Pregnant People Forced to Travel More Than 100 Kilometres to Give Birth. Why is it the ABC's just completely reluctant to say that only women can get pregnant.
That is trying to exploit their vulnerabilities, exploit their emotions. His whole entire network's job is to do it 1,000,000 times more than Joe Rogan, and he has zero introspection, zero humility. This is what's wrong with media.
I personally find it deeply repulsive. And to think that someone has such remarkable power in the United States is something that I look at in disbelief.
Hey, don't be racist.
He just looks at the power. For him, it's about power. Joe Rogan does not flex power. If you ever watch Joe Rogan, he really is, he's a seeker, and he's looking for the truth. He's so conversational and non-preachy about it in a way that ABC News is only preachy. They tell you what to think. They're always skewing information. They do not respect their audience, and that's why their audience is shrinking, and they're the past, and they're going to collapse. And people like Joe Rogan, who are more open, conversational, and respectful of 3 billion people, are going to continue to grow.
I'm also absolutely in dismay that this can be a source of public entertainment when it's really treating the public as plunder for purposes that are really quite malevolent.
You know, you can go down to all the comedians and late night hosts we've known in the last few election cycles where people got their news from late night talk show hosts, Jimmy Kimmel, David Letterman, Stephen Colbert. No one had a problem with the malevolence of them or the idea that they were getting their news from entertainment. And suddenly when it's Joe Rogan, when it's a man who's not on the Democrat payroll, they are terrified.
Now, when you leave a meeting like that, what do?
You go endorse Donald Trump.
I'm John Mike Keane.